Hello and welcome to Cogito Ergo Pod, the show where we discuss, delve and dissect theology, philosophy, mysticism and the esoteric. I'm your host Daniel and I'm so glad you're here. Before we pierce the veil of today's topic, I want to send a quick reminder to support the show. Please make sure you are following and subscribed to us on whatever podcast platform you are listening on now. Also, come join our community over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us at Cogito Ergo Pod, where we post visual deep dives, historical artifacts, and behind-the-scenes content. What if I told you there was a single object, a rusted piece of iron bound with gold and silver, that was said to grant its wielder the power to conquer the world? An artifact sought by emperors, kings, conquerors, and dictators alike. A relic that blurs the lines between sacred artifact, mythological talisman, and historical curiosity. Today we are tracing the bloodline of the Spear of Destiny, also known as the Holy Lance or the Spear of Longinus. We'll look at its biblical origins, the titans of history who claimed it, and the modern scientific studies that tried to uncover the truth behind the metal. Let's dive in. Our story begins in the 1st century, specifically around 33 CE in Jerusalem. According to tradition and the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 34 to be exact, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. To ensure that he was dead before the onset of the Sabbath, a Roman centurion thrust his spear into Jesus' side, resulting in a sudden flow of blood and water. The Bible doesn't name this soldier, but in the apocryphal Gospel of Nicodemus, written centuries later, he is given a name, Longinus. Legend states that Longinus was nearly blind, but when the blood and water from the spear splashed into his eyes, his sight was miraculously restored. He instantly converted to Christianity, eventually becoming a saint. From this single brutal act, a legend was born. The spear transformed from a standard-issue Roman weapon into a holy relic of unimaginable power. A prophecy attached itself to the lance. Whosoever possesses this holy lance and understands the powers it serves holds in his hand the destiny of the world for good or evil. With a tagline like that, it doesn't take long for the most powerful men in history to start hunting for it. The first major historical figure associated with the spear was Constantine the Great in the early 4th century CE. Constantine was the first Roman emperor considered to have converted to Christianity, and law states that he held the spear as he claimed his empire and founded Constantinople, now Istanbul. Fast forward to the turn of the 9th century. Enter Charlemagne, the king of the Franks and the first Holy Roman Emperor. Crowned in the year 800 CE, Charlemagne reportedly carried the spear through 47 victorious battles. The legend of the spear's protective magic grew exponentially here. It was said Charlemagne was completely invincible while holding it, but the moment he accidentally dropped it, he died. This became a recurring theme. In 1190 CE, the formidable Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, who also claimed ownership of the spear, dropped it into a stream during the Third Crusade. Mere minutes later, he fell into the water and drowned. Eventually, the spear found its way into the hands of the Habsburgs, one of the most prominent royal houses of Europe. For centuries, it sat safely in the imperial treasury, the Schatzkammer, at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria. It became a symbol of divine right and imperial authority. But the mythology of the spear would eventually attract the attention of the 20th century's darkest figure, We must approach this next chapter with the gravity it requires, as it involves the catastrophic rise of Nazi Germany. Between 1909 and 1913, a young, destitute Adolf Hitler was living in Vienna. According to historical accounts, Hitler frequently visited the Hofburg Museum and became utterly obsessed with the Spear of Destiny. He saw it not as a religious relic, but as a mystical talisman of Germanic Aryan power. Decades later, in March 1938, Nazi Germany annexed Austria in an event known as the Anschluss. Almost immediately, Hitler ordered the Spear of Destiny, along with other imperial regalia, to be seized and transported to Nuremberg, the spiritual home of the Nazi movement. As the tide of World War II turned and the Allies closed in, the Nazis hid the spear in a heavily fortified bunker deep beneath Nuremberg Castle. But empires fall, and so do their leaders. In April 1945, advancing Allied forces, specifically the Monuments Men of the U.S. 7th Army under General George S. Patton, discovered the bunker and recovered the spear. In a bizarre coincidence of timing, the spear was secured by U.S. forces on the afternoon of April 30th, 1945. Only hours later, hidden away in a bunker in Berlin, Adolf Hitler took his own life. The legend of the spear, that he who loses it loses his life, seems to echo once again. General Patton, a student of history, recognized the spear and ensured it was safely returned to the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, where it remains on display today. So, we have a relic that supposedly killed Christ, built empires, and survived 2 world wars. But is it real? What happens when mythology meets the microscope? Let's take a look at the science. There are actually a few spears in the world claiming to be the true Spear of Longinus, including ones in Armenia and at the Vatican. But the Vienna lance is the most famous. For centuries, the Catholic Church and the Austrian government refused to let the spear be dismantled or tested. However, in 2003, Dr. Robert Feather, an English metallurgist and technical engineering writer, was granted unprecedented access to examine the Hofburg spear. Dr. Feather subjected the relic to non-destructive testing, including X-ray fluorescence and microscopic analysis. And the results were fascinating. First, the bad news for believers. The metallurgical analysis proved conclusively that the main blade of the spear dated back to the 7th or 8th century CE, the early Middle Ages. It was a classic Carolingian-era winged lance. It simply did not exist in the 1st century, meaning it could not have been held by a Roman centurion at the crucifixion. But there is a twist. If you look closely at the Vienna spear, there is an iron pin hammered straight into the center of the blade, held in place by threads of copper and brass. Dr. Feather's tests on that specific pin yielded a very different result. The iron pin is consistent in length, shape, and metallurgical composition with a 1st century Roman crucifixion nail. So, while the spearhead itself is a medieval construction, it was essentially built as a reliquary, a housing forged centuries later to hold and protect a piece of iron that early Christians quite possibly truly believed was a nail from the true cross. The Spear of Destiny is a masterclass in how humanity creates meaning, whether it's just a piece of 8th century iron or a vessel carrying the blood of the divine. Its true power lies in the minds of the men who wielded it. It inspires courage, justified conquests, and fed the darkest delusions of grandeur. It is a mirror reflecting our ultimate desires for control, destiny, and power. Thank you for joining me on this whistle-stop tour through the history and mythology of the Spear of Longinus. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use. Leaving a 5-star review is the single best way to help the show grow and reach new listeners. And don't let the conversation end here. Come find us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Cogito Ergo Pod. Until next time, I'm Daniel. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and remember, Cogito Ergo Sum. I think, therefore I am.